Okay, Masechet Shekalim, Daf Zayin, and we're going to also do the first Amud of Daf Chet, so we can be on schedule for the upcoming 3-day holiday. The Mishnah spoke about if someone set aside some coins and said these are going to be for my Machasita Shekel, but he set aside some extra. What happens to that extra? Does it get designated or not? So once we spoke about that topic, we're going to talk about other items that you donated, but you donated too much money, more than necessary. What happens to the leftovers? So we're going to start with Nazir. Otan Nazir Lindava, the Mishnah says that anything extra that I gave to sponsor a particular Nazir, and as person might make himself a Nazir, but he might be too poor to offer the sacrifices. A Nazir has to bring an olah, a shelamim, and a hatat, besides 20 loaves. So this is a lot. So if I sponsor a Nazir and now there's extra money, it goes to Nidava, meaning that it'll go to free will offerings any time of the year when the Mizbeach is idle, so that there's something on it to burn. And okay, those are Kodesh Kodashim. Rav Chisda Amar, Vehu shekareva hatato basof, aval I karevu shelamim basof motaran. We're going to see two opinions now, machloket, about it. Does it depend on the order of the sacrifices that they were designated? So Rav Chisda says yes, it does. If the chatat is the main thing that we're focusing on, Rav Chisda says if the chatat was already sacrificed and all I have left is the olah and shelamim, Mishnah also said that if I donated for a shelamim and I have extra money goes for shelamim. It's always best if the money can go to that particular thing. So since I already did the chatat, now the extra money will in fact go to shelamim. That's Rav Chisda's opinion, as opposed to the Bizer Amar Bizer Aira afilu kareban shelamim lebasof halacha achat hi banazir shetiye motara nedava. His answer is no. It doesn't matter what the order is. Even if I did the olah already and I did the chatat already, and all I have left is a shelamim and I have extra money, nevertheless, I donate at the beginning for the whole Nazir, and therefore this is one law for the Nazir, no matter what the order is, it all goes to Nedava. That's the machloket. We're going to have now a proof for each one side and a proof for the other side. Matnitam Mesayah Leden, Matnitam Mesayah Leden. Braita supports him, and the Braita supports the other. Matnitam Mesayah Rabbi Zera. The one is Rabbi Zera in the Bavli, the same as Rabbi Ze'aira in the Yerushalmi, same person, different pronunciation. And so we're going to support this, the second opinion here that goes to Nedava from the Braita that says, Edohen ma'ot situmot. There's money that's unspecified. What does that mean, unspecified money? If someone donated a Nazir, let's say, or donated money and didn't specify which is going to be for which money is going to be a chatat, such that, let's say that Nazir all of a sudden died, and so then we wouldn't know which money is which. So that means that's unspecified. So that's called unspecified anytime that the money for a chatat is mixed up in it together with money for other things. So in that case, and then the Braita continues, even if he separated the money for chatat and says this is for chatat and the rest is for other things, it's still called unspecified because within that is olah, shelamim also mixed together. Okay, so you see, according to this Braita, even if you separated chatat first and the rest is for olah or shelamim, it's still considered unspecified money as if it has chatat money mixed into it. So that's the same as, similar enough to the Bizaira, that even if I already sacrificed the Korban Chatat, and all I have left is Olah Shelamim, I still treat the extra money as if it's also for Chatat, and therefore extra has to go for Korban Nedava. That's the first proof. Second proof, Matitam Besed Rav Chisda. We have a proof of Rav Chisda who says extra money goes to Shelamim if I already did the Chatat. How do we see that? If someone says this money is going to be for the chatat and the rest of the money will be for all the other things I have to bring, and Nazir says that. Okay, so that's the same as if you already sacrificed the chatat, he set that aside. And now that Nazir died, and if someone else comes and takes that money, misuses it, takes it for himself to buy a car. So if he takes all the rest of the money, he commits me'ilah. The reason is you commit me'ilah for taking something that's Kodesh Kodashim like an Olah, but not if you take something that's Kodesh Kodashim Kalim like a Shilamim before you give the blood. And so therefore, if he takes all the money, he commits Me'ilah because within that money is for Korban Olah. And if I only take some of the money, then I don't commit Me'ilah because I can assume that which I took for myself and misused is for Shalamim, but there's still enough left over for the Olah, which I did not take. That's what the Braita says. The proof is from what it does not say. It doesn't say that once he dies, then that money has to go to Nedava. It doesn't say that. It sounds like we can, in fact, use the money for Shalamim. And that supports Rav Chista's opinion. Okay, so that's that concludes those two proofs. Now Rav Chista, while we're together with them, says something else. Rav Chista amar motar lachmo shel nazir yurkav. The nazir also brings 20 loaves. So what happens if there's extra? Right, donate towards those loaves. Now there's extra money. Or actually got extra too many loaves. Those extra loaves have to be left to spoil. You can't use them for anything else. And if it was money that I donated, that money has to be thrown into the Dead Sea, so no one will ever find it again. It has to be destroyed. Why? We'll explain here. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef is explaining Rav Chista's opinion. Yes, that's true. להקריבו בפני עצמו אינת יכול, שאין לך לחם קרב לעצמו. להקריב עם נזירות אחרת אינת יכול, שאין לך נזירות באה, ולא לחם. There's no way that you can bring loaves on their own. There's no such thing as I'm just bringing loaves as a special gift. The loaves always come together with a sacrifice. So I can't just donate them by themselves. I can't join them with another next Nazir that comes because the next Nazir has to bring his own loaves. So I can't just add more loaves to that. But really, there's no use for them. That's why they just have to be destroyed. That's what we say, that they spoil. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to align three different opinions that we already saw two of them and show that they all follow the same principle. The principle is that if something is designated for Kodesh Kodashim and you have extra, then the extra goes to Nedava. We're going to see three cases of it. Savrin Memar, Hu Lachmo, Hu Motar Nechasav. Wait, before we get to that, one more law. So we thought to say that extra loaves would be the same law as the wine. Nazir also has to bring wine libations. What if there's extra wine or extra money for the wine libations? So we might have thought it would be the same law, that it would have to be destroyed. No. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Bon, Motar nechasav kodesh kodashim inun, v'pelulin dava. Right, that extra wine offering is kodesh kodashim. It goes to nedava because you can bring wine offering for lots of different things and by itself. So that's a lot more usable, and therefore it doesn't have to be destroyed. It goes to nedava. Okay, now that we said this is one example of kodesh kodashim that goes to nedava. Now we're going to show three examples that all fit with each other. According to this opinion here of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Bon, he himself is following the opinion of Rav Chista. And Shemuel alibad Rav Chista. Shemuel said something according to Rav Chista. Rav Chista is later. It means Rav Chista said something explaining Shemuel that now all fits together. Regarding extra wine libations, Rav Chista himself. This Rav Chista himself is actually going to be the same as Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Bon. So it looks like there's four people here, but there's really only three. Rabbi Elazar, they all said one principle. What is the principle? Rav Chista had Amaran. Rav Chista, which we just said here in the name of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Bon, that extra wine libation, that's Kodesh Kodashim, and if you have extra, it goes to Nadaba. That's one. Shemuel, the Ma'ad Rabbi Yosef, Adana Taman Shema'id Kal Rabbi Yehuda She'el Shmuel. So Rabbi Yosef says, when I was in Bavel, I heard Rabbi Yehuda, the student of Shemuel, ask him the following question: If someone donated a machasita shekel and then he died before he was able to actually give it, what do we do with that machasita shekel? Do we put it in the treasury? And he said, no. It has to go to the fund for the extra free will offerings during the year. He cannot join in for the communal offerings during the year because he died, and then and only someone who's alive can receive atonement with them. So there you go. That's also Kodesh Kodashim, because that money, Machzit Shekel, would go to all the communal offerings, which are Kodesh Kodashim. So extra Kodesh Kodashim goes to Nedava. And the third one is Rabbi Elazar Omer, Motar Asidi Taifa Shelo. The Kohen Gadol, we saw yesterday, has to bring Asid Taifa of a meal offering every day. And if he has some extra, what is he going to do with it? He can't use it the next day, because next day he has to bring his own, another Asid Taifa. No one else can use it. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yolichem Le'amelech, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Yipeludin Davar. Rabbi Yochanan over there said that you have to destroy it, but Rabbi Elazar, that's what we're interested in, says, you send it, you make it a nedava, free will offering. Since it's extra kodesh kodashim, goes to nedava. So you see, he follows the same principle. We have all three following the same. Okay, that's all for our Nazir. And now the next Mishnah goes to lots of other very interesting cases. People would get be captured all the time and held for ransom. So the community had to raise money to free that person. My great aunt was once kidnapped in Colombia and held for ransom. So that was a very scary time period a long time ago. So you can only imagine if this happened often. So now, what if we make a collection and everybody gives so much that now we have extra. So we keep it in a fund for kidnapped people, and we use it to pay the next one. This is like a regular business. Okay, crazy. What if we raise money not for the general kidnapping fund, but for one particular person? Well, then that money has to go to that particular person, even though they don't need it, right? We just, we give them the money because we raised it for them. So we can't use it for anybody else. If you make a fundraiser for the needy, then that money has to go for the needy. Even if there's no more needy right now, right? You have to keep it for needy somewhere else, some other time. But if you make a fundraiser for one particular person, this guy's down and out, let's raise money for him. And now you raise enough and he has enough to pay his rent. Nevertheless, you give him the extra, because that's what we had in mind when we donated. If we raise money because someone can't be a family can't afford to bury someone, they need to buy the burial shrouds. And so when if it's for the general burial fund, so that money has to go only for other people that need help for their burial fund. You can't take that money and use it for tuition. If we raise money for a particular person that died and there's extra, now what are you going to do? You can give it to him, he's dead. So you give it to his heirs. He has it, and now it will go into his inheritance. Okay, that was the first opinion, but Rabbi Meir says, no, we don't know. Why should we give it to the heirs? The heirs aren't in need of burial or necessarily poor, right? Well, I don't know what they are. So instead, we leave it in a separate fund until Eliyahu Navi comes, right? Until Mashiach comes, because we just don't know what to do with it, and we don't want to misuse it. So don't use it for anything. Rabbi Natan Omed, Rabbi Natan has another solution, that if you have extra money that you already bought the basics, the burial shroud and everything, then use the extra money to build a monument or a mausoleum over his grave. And so he'll have a very fancy grave. But you have to use it for that same designated purpose. Okay, this is a very good principle. I mean, this happens often today. I remember basically it was 1 year ago around today that there was someone called me and said they wanted to donate meals for frontline healthcare workers at the beginning of Corona. So I thought it was a good idea. We went to the president, the committee, as a synagogue, we're all going to donate a whole section of meals. But it took us like 3-4 days to get the money together. By the time we did, they already gave all the meals to everyone in the hospital. So now we had this extra money. What are we going to do with it? Can we use it for tuition, for something else? We have to use it for that. So we found another a similar cause that also helped out the frontline workers. So right, this happens often. All right, it's a good problem to have extra money to have to give out. The Gemara is now talking about a slightly different case. We collected money for someone thinking that he was in need, but then it turns out, that we lift up his mattress and he has a stash of cash under there, and he doesn't actually need it. So now we collected money. It's not extra money, but money that was actually never needed in the first place. So what should you do for someone that needs a burial, right? And turns out he has some hidden account, and so he doesn't need it for the burial. What should we do with that extra money that we collected for the burial? So the Bimei said, let's apply what the Mishnah says. Treat it the same as getting extra, collecting extra. It goes to the descendants, to the inheritors. We thought he was poor. It turns out he had money, but nevertheless, we collected it for him. Amar le Rabbi Idi techutra hagasmach atzmecha telakavenan edlale. So his colleague Rabbi Idi says, "What? Hold on to yourself, right? Think about what you just said. Doesn't make sense. They collected the money for this particular person who died. They collect money for the heirs. Why are you saying that? No, people wouldn't want the money to go to someone else." So the first Rabbi Yirmiyah pulls back. He says, "Listen, I didn't say actual halacha l'maaseh. I just offered a suggestion. Okay, what do you think? What do you have a better source? You have a better answer?" Okay, he leaves it like that. It's an interesting conversation. You kind of see it kind of live while they're still thinking through the issue. And so those are the two sides of it. I mean, one side, but not so comfortable with it. Taneh b'shem Rabbi Natan, motad hamet yivneh lo nefesh al kibro v'yaseh lo ziluf al gabe mitato. We have a braita that expands on the Mishnah that says if you have extra money that you collected for a particular deceased person, and you can use it to build a nefesh. Nefesh is what's called the gravestone monument, or some say it's a whole like mausoleum around on top of it. And you can also spray wine on him, on the body. Now, spraying wine would help with the aroma, with the odor. So while until they bury it, so it doesn't smell, they would get a particular kind of wine that had a big aroma, and then that would be more honorable. So we use rich people usually would do that, but since we have extra money, we can use it for that. En podin shavui b'shavui. So we have another braita that says you cannot use money that you collected for one captive person to redeem a different captive person. Then gobin talit b'talit. And if you collected money to buy clothing for one person, one poor person, you can't use it to buy clothing for a different poor person. Then mamchin biyad parnasim lakach. However, we do not protest against the parnasim, the collectors, the community collectors regarding these matters. In other words, whenever someone gives, they know they're giving to an organization that has a committee or people that are in charge of collecting, and they're going to do with it the best that they can. So although there are strict rules that they should only use it for a particular thing, once you donated money, you should trust the people that are in charge of giving it out, and don't give them a hard time. So don't make protests and start complaining that they misused your money, right? Assume that they are, hopefully they're trustworthy. And even if they used it for a slightly different purpose, that you have that in mind, that they will be responsible with it. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, en osin nefashot asadikim, dibrehen hen zichronan. Beautiful statement. There is no need to make monuments for righteous people because their words, the words of Torah that they teach and inspire people, that itself is their memorial. No need to put their name on a building or anything physical. The best memorial are the words that they teach. Okay, so we're going to go into a few stories about this concept, that the legacy of righteous people, of sages, are their words.
Now we're stuck where to put the money. We still don't know where to put the money. He took away the whole grave thing. It was perfect.
Right, took away the grave. Forget the graves. Right?
I'm just saying, but that's where everybody was agreeing to. Okay, put it on the grave. Use it to pour it on the body. Use it. Now he's like, no, we don't need that. So now we still have no.
Right. All that we could. Right. So all that was talking about regular people. A common person. That's their nefesh. And no one's going to remember them for their wisdom. They didn't have any wisdom, right? They're not sages. They're not teaching anything. So the only way to remember them is to have something physical with their name on it. The bigger, the better. But for sages, they don't need any of that. Forget it. Just remember my words. Right? Quote it in my name. That's the greatest honor. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan, amazing story. Listen to the story. Rabbi Yochanan, he's the greatest sage of the Yerushalmi. He studied with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and lived to first and second generation, lived a long time, had many students. Basically, the entire Talmud Yerushalmi is Rabbi Yochanan and his students, to the point that Rambam says that Rabbi Yochanan composed the Talmud Yerushalmi. You can't take that literally because it still goes for another 3 generations after Rabbi Yochanan. Nevertheless, they're all from his Torah. So it's fitting to tell the story about Rabbi Yochanan, who is remembered more than anybody else in the Talmud Yerushalmi. So anyway, Rabbi Yochanan, when he was elderly, he was walking and leaning al Rabbi Yechia bar Abba. As he was walking and leaning on one student, another student of his, Rabbi Eliezer, it should be Rabbi Elazar, that we see often. He was one of the main students of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elazar saw Rabbi Yochanan, but would hide. He would hide behind the pole, hide behind the wall, and he wouldn't show himself to his teacher. Rabbi Yochanan was offended, and he said, look at this guy, this Babylonian. So Rabbi Elazar came from Babel. All right, look what he does to me. These two things. Number one, he doesn't come out and say, "How are you, Rabbi? How are you feeling?" Doesn't say hello to me, and he hides from me, like he's embarrassed. What's going on? So these are the two things that he does. Second, that he hides. So now Rabbi Yochanan is very upset at his student Rabbi Elazar. So the other students try to make peace. So one of the students, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, says, "Listen, this is what the custom in Babel. He came from Babel. They have different ways of being polite there, and so over there, they feel like it's not nice to go and to your rabbi and say, 'How are you doing?' You should be more fearful." After all, Rabbi Zera was a student of Rabbah, and he never said, "How are you?" Right? You don't go to the great sage and talk to him like a friend. How are you feeling today? You have to be like in awe of him. Pasuk from Iyov, it says the young people saw me and hid. The aged rose up and stood, right? So that the young people, they should go and hide when someone of great respect comes in. That's why. It's actually out of respect for you. That's why he's hiding. Maleh, and since he's hiding, he's not going to come talk to you, and he doesn't say hello either. So So Ravidi saw Rabbi Yochanan still was not pacified. So he asks him a question that seems unrelated, but he's going to relate it back. So he says, what do you think about going in front of the statue, Adura? It's an idol that was out in public. Are you allowed to walk down the road that has the idol near it, or should you bypass and go to a side road? So Rabbi Yochanan says, what, do you want to give it honor? And do you give it honor by passing in front of it? You're just going on your way. You don't care what's on the street. Rather, I walk in front of it, and as you walk near it, blind its eyes. Insult it. Right? If you're going to go all round about, you're actually giving it honor like it's important. Right? Just pass by it and insult it on your way. That's what you should do. So now Rav Yaakov bar Idi says, see, exactly the same. It's good that Rabbi Elazar does not pass in front of you, because, see, just passing casually in front of something shows that you don't care about it. And that's exactly why he did that. He's trying to explain the Babylonian custom of that they would hide and not ask about not ask about the welfare of the teacher. See, that's why he's doing it. Not that he's treating you like an idol, but rather, if he would pass in front of you, that would be treating you like an idol, like something that's not important, that you just go back and forth. He's scared. He goes round about. He shows you honor by doing that. Okay, but still Rabbi Yochanan was not pacified. Now we see the real reason that Rabbi Yochanan was upset, ועוד עביד היי בבלעה, דלה אמר שמעתם משם. Yochanan says, this Babylonian, you know what else he does wrong? He teaches Torah that I taught him, and he doesn't say it in my name, right? He's taking it for himself. And that's what really is upsetting him. He's plagiarizing. Nichnesu lefanav Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi. Okay, so Rabbi Yaakov, he couldn't deal with this one. Two other students come, Rabbi Amir and Rabbi Asi, and they tell Rabbi Yochanan, Amrullah, Rabbi, kachaya maaseh bebet haKnesset shel Tarsiyim be'negel sheyesh berosho gelus Torah shenechleku. So listen, Rabbi, remember that case in the Bet Knesset in Tarsus, where there was a big machloket regarding this doorknob that has a protrusion. The question there was regarding Hilchot Shabbat. You consider this, that you could take this doorknob and you can use it to prop open a door. Let's say, are you allowed to as a mukseh or not? Since it has the knob on top, it's actually a useful item. You can use it for crushing things, for opening things like a hammer. So is it mukseh to use for other things as well? There was a huge machloket about this topic, and it got so heated and personal that, remember what happened there? It got so heated and angry about it, they tore a Sefer Torah while they were arguing. I guess they were looking for proofs in Torah. One was pulling this way, one was pulling the other way, and they tore a Sefer Torah. It could be literal or it could be figurative, that their argument was so great that they disgraced the Torah in their argumentation. And the Gemara doesn't like to take this literally, that they actually ripped the Sefer Torah. So this is Karus HaKadatich. I think they actually ripped it. Ela shenikra Sefer Torah. It was ripped, not that like purposely ripped it, but just it got ripped up. Anyway, Vayasham Zaken Echad v'Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma Shemo Amar Temehani im la hava bet HaKnesset ze avodah zara. This other Tana, this is an old story from the times of the Tanaim. And so Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma said, I would be surprised if this Bet Knesset didn't become a place of idolatry, idolatry, and sure enough it was. So you see, because that their Torah was not respectful. It's okay to argue, but right, you have to argue in a respectful way, because they argued in such a way that brought disgrace to the Torah. That whole Bet Knesset became avodah zarah. Why is he telling him the story? Right, so he says, Rabbi Yochanan, you're upset with your student about this, but don't get so upset that you're going to make such a big deal out of it, because then you're going to be like that story of those two sages that took everything personally and it turned into a place of idolatry. Okay, that's what he was trying to say, to get Rabbi Yochanan to accept his student back. Rabbi Yochanan did not buy it. Says, you want to compare me to those two who were colleagues? They were colleagues and fighting against each other, so each one had a right. So they should have gotten along. But here, this is my student, and the student is lower down. The student should never do something that would bother the teacher. So it's the student's responsibility. They have to treat the teacher with respect. And number one part of giving respect is quoting the teacher in his name. And so don't give me that story about colleagues. Doesn't apply here. I have a right to be angry at the student. Okay, so now back to the drawing board. They're trying to figure out how we're going to pacify Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, who we had before, comes again and speaks to and tries to mollify Rabbi Yochanan. Nichnas afanav Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi amar le ketiv Kasher siva Adonai et Moshe abdo, ken siva Moshe et Yehoshua. Right, pasuk in Yeshua says, just as Hashem commanded Moshe, so He commanded Yehoshua. Right, Yeshua is teaching the people, is teaching them Torah. Now, obviously, all of Yeshua's Torah came from Moshe. You think every time he says something, he says, in the name of Moshe, I say this. In the name of Moshe, Moshe told me this. Does he have to say every time? Doesn't everybody know that all of his Torah came from Moshe? He doesn't even have to say it. He sits and speaks, says Torah without attribution, and everybody knows, and he learned all of his Torah from Moshe. הכל יודעים שהתורה שלך היא מלהן, מפני אין אתם יודעים לרסות, כבן ידיך ברנו. So too, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi tells Rabbi Yochanan, your student Rabbi Elazar sits and teaches, and doesn't say anything in your name, but everybody knows that you are his only teacher, his primary teacher, and everything he says is your Torah. It's assumed. He doesn't even have to say it. That's how obvious it is. And so Rabbi Yochanan accepted this, and he was pacified. And then he turned his anger to Rabbi Ameh, and Rabbi Ameh said, the other student says, how come you don't know how to pacify me like Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi? Right? Why don't you tell me this in the first place? Instead, you told me a story about someone people who script the Sefer Torah, and you compared me to a colleague. Right? That got me more angry. This is a proper answer. Okay, so great story. And now we're going to explain further why was Rabbi Yochanan so concerned that this Torah be taught in his name. Rabbi Yochanan, דאף דוד ביקש עלי רחמים, שנאמר, אגורה באהלך עולמים, אחסה בסתר כנפיך סלע. Says, yes, everybody, not only Rabbi Yochanan, all the sages, everyone wants their name to be included in the chain of tradition, and even David, HaMelech, because he says, may I dwell in your tents forever. Now, how could you dwell in tents forever? Is he going to be alive forever, that he can dwell in God's tent forever? He says, his prayer was, may my words, the words that I've taught, the poems that I've written, may they be recited in forever, and in that way, I too will be memorialized. So here you see is that principle that a person's a sage's greatest legacy is to be quoted in later generations. Shimon ben Nizira b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak amar kol tamid chacham sheomrim devar halacha mepiv ba'olam hazeh sefatav lo chashot imo b'kever. Famous derasha. Any sage who someone repeats halacha in his name in this world, his lips move in the grave, right? As if they're speaking the words, as if he's here actually pronouncing the words. Shene emar. That your palate, your mouth is like the best wine. That lips that moves the lips of those that sleep. So siftei yeshanim means sages who have died, and it moves their lips. This wine. Now, what's the comparison of wine to moving lips? Ma komer, I mean, in the pshat is that someone tastes wine and it whets your appetite and makes the person want to drink. Here, ma komer she'anavim zeh kevan shemaniach adam esba'o alav miyad dobeb af siftotehem shel sadikim kevan shemim al champihem shel sadikim siftotem merachashot imahen ba'kebed. They would take grapes and they would put them in a vat in a warm place to start so that they would warm up, and then that way they would be easy to get the juice out of. So these warmed up grapes, if you just touch them, already the juice starts coming out. So that's the analogy between the Torah. So too, if someone mentions a word of Torah in someone's name, then it's that their Torah starts pouring forth, their lips start moving. All this obviously is not literal, but the point is that since they taught it, they were thinking these thoughts, right? They had this insight and they taught it, and now we're also saying it, thinking about it, and saying his name. So it's as good as the sage himself being here and teaching it to us, right? There's no greater honor than being remembered for one's Torah. Okay, what benefit, what is there for the righteous person when his lips are moving? It's like someone who drinks this is like a dessert special wine, this spiced wine that's very delicious. That's what it feels like. No, like drinking aged wine. This is a good analogy between wine and these old sages, because they both get better with age, right? The more someone's Torah gets passed on and remembered, even 1,000 years later, you see that it must be great quality that is still being passed on. That aged wine, even after you drink it, the taste remains for a long time after. Okay, the Gidel adds another thing, that if you're quoting someone, you should picture the person in front of you. not only hearing his words, but also seeing them. Have a multimedia experience, and then you remember it better. Remember their hand gestures or their facial expressions. כתיב רב אדם יקרא איש חסדו זה שאר כל אדם ואיש אמונים מי ימצא זה רבי זעירא. Then has friends, ish chasod, someone they can call friends, but who could find an ish emunim? Who could find a really trustworthy person that that could be a faithful friend? So who is it talking about? Rabbi Za'ira. Rabbi Za'ira would quote things in the name of the one who said it, also be so faithful in even picturing what they look like. And so that was very important to him. So that's why we can trust the things that Rabbi Zera said. Here's what Rabbi Zera said about another sage. Rabbi Zera, letnan sirichin chashashin l'shmateh derav sheshat v'hu gavra mepatcha. Surprising statement. It says we don't have to worry about the traditions of Rav Sheshat because he was an open-eyed man. A euphemism for his being blind. Rav Sheshat was blind, and therefore he could not fulfill this law of having the face of his teachers in front of him. Not seeing the face of his teachers, maybe he missed out on some facial expressions and didn't remember it perfectly accurately. So it's not such a nice thing to say about someone's blind. The point is that he so much emphasized this idea of seeing the faces of your teacher that he went out of his way to make sure that whenever he heard something, it was only from someone who actually heard it from the teacher directly and knew what he looked like. This is, today I like to, if I'm reading something, an article or a book, I like to go on YouTube or something and see them, right? See them, not just read their words, but you get a sense of their personality if you see them lecturing also. אמר לרבי זעירא רבי עשה, חכים רבי לבר פתיה דעת אמר שמעתה משמע. So Rabbi Zera told Rabbi Ase, when Rabbi Ase quoted someone, he quoted he quoted Bar Patya. Did you know Bar Patya? Did you ever meet him? That you're quoting something in his name? Did you hear it directly from him, right? And know what he looks like? Or is it just hearsay? No, I never met him, but I heard Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said it in his name. Okay, so as you want to get the chain of tradition right, someone has to hear it directly. So you'd always go back and verify the traditions that you heard. That's Rabbi Zera. Amar Rabbi Zera Rabbi Aseh. Similar story to similar story. Hakim Rabbi Lerav Da'at Machmata Mishemeh. He quoted something in the name of Rav, the same Rabbi Aseh. Says, did you know him? That you're quoting him in his name? Says, no, I didn't, but Rabbi did hear it from him. Okay, now we can accept it because we got the exact chain of tradition, and now we can know who said it from whom. Okay, very beautiful drashot, and I guess it worked because we're sitting here 2,000 years later quoting these traditions and these stories in the names of their original authors. So hopefully their lips are moving in their graves, and hopefully we're explaining them correctly so that we're doing them a favor. Okay. Every generation has some people that like to that are mockers, scoffers. They always find something to make fun of. But there might be different things. So in the times of David, what did they make fun of? היו הולכים אצל חלונותיו של דוד, אומרים לו, דוד, מתי ייבנה בית המקדש, מתי בית אדוני נלך? So they would go to pass by the palace and say, right, David, when's the Beit HaMikdash going to be built? They knew that. Hashem told David, you can't build the Beit HaMikdash. It's only going to be in the time of your son. So by saying this, they're kind of making him feel bad that he can't build the Beit HaMikdash. It's also, in a way, cursing him. Where we can't wait for the Beit HaMikdash to be built. That's in a way saying, we can't wait for you to kick the bucket so that your son will come and he will build the Beit HaMikdash. So this was not a very nice thing to say. Even though their intention is to anger me, David took it in a positive spirit. Right? May bad come to me, if not, that I would be happy with their words. I too wish that the Mikdash would be built, and the sooner the better, even though it would mean that he would have to die. It's beautiful. They take that, right, this Shira Ma'alot that we say, And you see, put it in context. Samachti, right? David is saying, I am happy when these mockers tell me, let's go to Bet Hashem. Because otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. How would David be saying, oh, I'm happy that we said that we went, assuming David wrote this mizmor. Why? How could he say that we're happy that we're going to Bet HaMikdash? There is no Bet HaMikdash. So it means that these are the mockers saying, David saying, oh, I wish, I agree. So back in Shemuel, when Hashem tells David that you're not going to build the Bet HaMikdash only after you die, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeDavid, Yamim shelemim ani moneh lecha velo yamim chasirim. Says, don't worry, you're going to have full days, not missing days, right? Now you're not going to die any sooner just because your son is going to build the Bet HaMikdash. Kelum Shlomo bincha yibnei Bet HaMikdash ela lakrib korbanot tzibur. Why is Shlomo building Bet HaMikdash? So that then you could have communal sacrifices. This is the whole theme of this perek, of the whole Masechet, of the Machazit HaShekel, which are paid for by the communal donation. And so that's why he's building Bet HaMikdash. Don't worry. Chaviv alai tzedakah u'mishpat she'ata oseh yoter min hakorbanot shlemar aso tzedakah u'mishpat aseh tzedakah u'mishpat nibchar l'Adonai mizabach. As a pasuk in Mishleh says, doing righteousness and justice is better, is more choice to Hashem than offering of sacrifices. So that's a beautiful way to end this. Is David, you'll have a long life, right? You through your teachings and through your works and deeds, actions and righteousness, that is much more valuable than all the sacrifices in the world. And so this is with that we end this perek. Adon alach besarfin Shekalim. Right? It's just beautiful. The rabbis, although they spent so much time talking about all the details of korbanot over here, you see the rabbis themselves are living at a time without a Bet HaMikdash, and so this is more than good consolation for themselves that they can teach Torah and hopefully be remembered for many generations to come through their Torah and the good deeds that inspires. Okay, and now we begin the third perek. Bishlosha, third perek starts with the word three. That's good. Bishlosha perakim bashana turmin et halishka. We saw this Mishnah mentioned already before, that there are actually 3 times a year in which the Kohanim would go to the main treasury chamber and they would remove in boxes some of the coins to be used, and they would take those boxes and go to the farmers and suppliers and buy animals and flour to be used for the Korban Tamid and other communal sacrifices. When would they do these 3 withdrawals? There's actually 3 opinions about this. The first opinion, which is Rabbi Akiva, says Bifros HaPesach, Bifros Atzeret, Bifros HeChag. Bifros means half a month before Pesach, so around Rosh Chodesh Nisan, half a month before Shavuot. Shavuot is on the 6th, so count 15 days before the 6th of Sivan. Bifros HeChag, half a month before Sukkot, which would be around Rosh Hashanah. Behem Geranot Shema'asar Behema Dibre Rabbi Akiva. And furthermore, these are also the times that you would give the 10th of the animal. Any animals that were born from Sukkot, from Rosh Hashanah until Nisan, right? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they would also not only gather together to make a withdrawal for the Machazit HaShekel, they would also say, anyone who has korbanot, count them all now. Anyone who has new animals that were born, count them all now. They'll go through a small passageway. You count 1 to 5, 7, 9, 10. The 10th one, you paint with a red stripe, and then you'll know that one will be the Maaser Behema, and you have to bring it to the Bet HaMikdash and donate it. Okay, so we do it these 3 times a year. That's according to the Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai Omer Bishbesim, he disagrees on the dates, right? Also, yes, he agrees it's 3 dates, but slightly different. Not 15 days before Pesach, but rather 29th of Adar. Well, that'd be about exactly the same most years. If there's a 30th of Adar, if Adar is Maleh, then there would be disagreement. And as I would say, 29th, no matter what, according to Bekiba, would be on the 30th. Okay, so slight difference. Ehad Besivan, he says on the 1st of Sivan, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is only 6 days before before Shavuot, not 15 days before. Seems like he thinks that there's too few days between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and the next one, Sivan. It's only It's only a short time. I mean, it's like the time we're counting the Omer plus 2 weeks. So he pushes it off a few more days to have more space between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and the Shavuot time. The Tzvim v'Tisha B'Av and the 29th of Av. Beforehand we said it would be on like Rosh Hashanah. He says no, it's a month before, right? The end of Av, the beginning of Elul, is the second time. Okay, that's the second opinion. The B Elazar, the B Shimon Omrim. These two sages say Be'achad b'Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Okay, that's similar to what we had before. Be'achad b'Sivan, the first of Sivan. That's similar to Ben Azai. Be'sim Tisha Be'Elul, the 29th of Elul. That's similar to the Bi'akiva, right? The end of Elul or beginning of Tishrei rather than the beginning of Elul. Okay, so these are three different opinions. How come these two sages said the 29th of Elul? Why don't they just say the first of Tishrei? Because that would be Yom Tov itself, and you can't designate the Maaser on Yom Tov. After all, it involves lots of things, including painting a red stripe, which you can't do on Yom Tov. So therefore, they said no, it means the 29th of Elul. Presumably, Rabbi Akiva would agree because he just said 15 days before Sukkot, but that could be the day before the last day of Elul. All right, now the Gemara will analyze. Amar Abu Kol Hen Detanenan Peras Palga. Whenever we see the word Peras, it means half. Palga de Shloshim Yom Kodem Lamoed Shadoshim Hilchotav. Half of what? Half of a month. Because as you know, we should teach the laws of Pesach 30 days beforehand. So half of those 30 days, that's when you would make the withdrawal for Machazit HaShekel. Next, Mishnah next says, Vehen Geranot, right? These are also the times in which we bring the tithe of the animal. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mipnei Shehen Pirkei Leda. Why these three times? Well, if you look at all different types of animals and when they give birth generally in during these three time periods, depending on what kind of animal it is. And some give birth before Pesach, some before Shavuot, and some before Sukkot. And so that way, these are the three waves of animals giving birth, so we can do it close to the time when they give birth. That's one reason. Another reason, when you can't use any of the new animals of the flock until you take a tenth, just like with fruit, with produce, until you give maaser, you can't eat the rest of it. So too, you cannot eat any of the other animals or use them as korbanot until you separate the tenth. So therefore, we're going to do it before each holiday, because before each holiday, lots of people want to come for a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they want to bring korbanot with them, so they need them to be available. So it's convenient to take the tithe during these three time periods. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, the third reason, Shelo yavo lidei ba'al te'acher. Amar Rabbi Yosef, kol ha'mashet tiblo over be'ba'al te'acher. Other reason is not to delay. You shouldn't think you owe something to the Mikdash. So, right, pay your taxes sooner. Don't wait till the last minute, because anyone who waits, doesn't bring his table all the holidays pass, right? Full 3 seasons, 3 holidays pass, a full year, then he violates al te'acher, right? You should pay the debt immediately. So all those 3 reasons, not mutually exclusive. Taman Tanenan, Rabbi Meir Omer, Bechad Be'elul, Rosh Hashanah L'Masar Behema. Okay, so we saw in the Mishnah that according to, there's a Baraita that's expanding on the dates of the Mishnah. We didn't see the opinion of Rabbi Meir, this is adding to it. So Rabbi Meir says on the first of Elul, that's the Rosh Hashanah for Maaser Behema, so the first of Elul. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon Omrim Be'achad B'Tishrei. Rabbi Elazar, as we saw, said no, the first of Tishrei. So which is the first of Elul or the first of Tishrei? Machloket. Ben Azai Omer ha'eluliyim mitaserin b'fnei asma. Ben Azai wants to make a compromise. He wants to follow both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon. So he says, you know what? We're going to treat anything that's born in Elul. You have to take all those. Let's say you had 100 animals born in Elul. A tenth of those, you have to take 10 of those animals. That's a designation in and of itself. And that's a separate group of animals than the ones that are born after Tishrei, from Tishrei until Nisan. Those all go together. You had 1,000 animals in that group, so then you take 100 from them. But you don't mix one from the other. You don't take something that was born in Elul and take it as Ma'aseh for something that was born beforehand or afterwards. So in that way, we can follow all the opinions and make a compromise. Amar Rabbi Huna is the same as Rabbi Huna, pronounced differently. Tamad Rabbi Meir, Ad kan hen mitmasot leled min hayeshanot. What's the reason for Rabbi Meir? Why does he say Rosh Chodesh Elul? Well, in general, small animals like sheep and goats, their gestation period is 5 months. And so, since the new year starts on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so that means that if it was conceived before Nisan, then it will have been will give birth before Elul. So that's one batch. Anything that's conceived after Nisan is going to be born after Elul. So that belongs to the next fiscal year of the animals. So you see, according to him, it doesn't go by when they give birth, but rather when they are conceived. And so we're counting 5 months backwards and using the 1st of Nisan as the cutoff date. That's his reason. Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Bun b'shem Rav Huna, Tamad Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon la b'shu karim hason. So now we're going to explain the other opinion, the one that says that it's on Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Why Rosh Chodesh Tishrei? Doesn't he agree that it's 5 month gestation and all that? He says yes, but we nevertheless group them together because of the pasuk in Tehillim that's talking about different types of animals. That Lavishu Charim Hason, the flocks are clothed in the meadows. They have extra flesh because they have conceived. These are talking about animals that were conceived early. Sometimes they conceive, right? They're conceived a little bit earlier. Elu habakirot. So those are the early ones. V'amakim ya'tefu bar, and the valleys are wrapped in grain. This is referring to the ones that are conceived late in Nisan. And so, right, so even though they belong to the same group, they happen to be conceived a little bit later, and they're going to be born only in Tishrei. Yitra'u af yashiru elu ve'elu nichnasin ladir lit'asher. These and these, even though it says they sing and shout for joy. So even though they were conceived at different times during around Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and therefore they will be born at different times around Rosh Chodesh Elul, between Elul and Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Nevertheless, even though since they're all around the cutoff point, they all play together. They're all in one pen together, so they're all considered one group. And so we don't go by the strict cutoff point of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and therefore Rosh Chodesh Elul, when they're conceived, we consider that those that are born a little early, a little later, they're all together. And that's his reason to follow Rosh Tishrei as the cutoff point and doesn't worry about that, the Eluls. Okay. Amar ben Azai, ho'il ve'elu ve'omerim kach ve'elomim kach, yu ha'eluliyim mitasirim b'fnei asman. Ben Azai says, since there's some opinions that follow Rosh Chodesh Elul and some follow Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, we want to make peace, so we designate this 1 month as its own fiscal time period, and anything born then, you have to give a tenth during that time period. HaKesad, for example, Nolad lo b'chamisha be'av. On the 5th of Av, you have 5 animals are born in Av. V'chamisha be'elul, and 5 in Elul. V'chamisha b'tishrei, and 5 more in Tishrei. And Mistadifin, even though each one's only a month apart, they do not join together. The one in Av is from the previous year. The one from Tishrei Elul is its own time period. From Elul, and one from Tishrei is going to be for the next year. But if 5 were born in Tishrei and 5 were born 10 months later in Av, those are part of the same year, right? Because it goes from Tishrei all the way till Av, and then Elul is its own. So that's the kind of paradox, even though in the first case, they're born only a month apart, they're separate fiscal time periods, and yet these that are born 10 months apart are within the same time period. Okay. Ben Azai, Machri al Dibret Talmidav. Now, another interesting question about Ben Azai. Can Ben Azai make a decision regarding his students? right? Doesn't make sense because the other sages are his students. If he's the teacher should just say, the halacha is like this. The teacher shouldn't have to worry that he wants to be careful and follow this and follow that. He is an authority over the students. So why is he, Ben Azai, who's older, making a compromise among his students? Good question. No, in fact, these later sages were Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon. They were actually continuing a controversy that started way before from the fathers of the world. Who is that? It was actually a generation before Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Okay, Ben Azai was kind of a student of Rabbi Akiva, right? So now we're switching. Ben Azai is deciding or making a compromise between an older stages of an older generation, Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. All right. Okay, according to this, if you think that this is true, then Ben Azai cannot be a student, because a student also should not decide between the teachers, but rather usually it's a colleague. Most of the time you have three colleagues. Two of the colleagues disagree. The third colleague will say, I'll be the deciding vote. I'll make a compromise between the two. That is appropriate, but a student shouldn't. So therefore, according to this, Ben Azai, yes, he was a student of Rabbi Akiva, but such an advanced student that he was almost like a colleague. Tamid Chaver. In Temar Rabbe, because if Ben Azai was just a student, can a student ever tell his teacher, well, you say this, others say that, I'll make a compromise between you and your colleagues? Not appropriate for a student to do that. Rabbi Abun b'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak shama la min hada. The same principle we can learn, that the same idea that Ben Azai was a Tamid Chaver, we can learn from another story. Amalo Ben Azai, ala chalukin al mista'arin, ela shebat ala chalok alenu et hashavin. זאת אומרת, Ben Azai, Haver v'tamid, hava v'Rabbi Akiva. There's another case, this is about inheritance law, that they brought a machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, and then the Mishnah brings a case where Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel agree, and then Rabbi Akiva says, I disagree with both of them. And on that, Ben Azai tells Rabbi Akiva, right, it's enough that we have enough machloket. Finally, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai agree on something, and now you're coming to add a disagreement? Okay, so that would not be appropriate for a student to say, right? It's not respectful. How dare you? Why are you adding more machloket? Would a student tell a master, oh, now we finally have an agreement, and you're coming to add disagreement? Would it be respectful? Therefore, you see, Ben Azai was, although a student, also advanced enough to actually be a colleague and could speak to the Rabbi Akiva as a colleague. All right, and the last section on this amud, Taman Tanenan, Kol Hanoladin Me'achad Metishre Ad 29 Be'elul, Hare Elu Mistarefin. So we have Mishnah in Bechorot that says any animals that are born from Rosh Chodesh Tishrei until the 29th of Elul, all joined together. In other words, the entire year, right, goes all the way around, is one time period. So Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, meaning Rosh Hashanah, is the cutoff period. That's the fiscal year for animals. Okay. Hachamisha lifnei Rosh Hashanah, hachamisha lachar Rosh Hashanah, and mistarfin. Therefore, if we apply that, if 5 animals are born right before Rosh Hashanah and 5 right after Rosh Hashanah, they belong to different fiscal years and they do not join together. You cannot say, oh, here's 10 and take 1 for all 10. Right? They have to go by the collection of everything born that year. However, remember the Mishnah, our Mishnah all the way back in the beginning of the Perek, talked about 3 time periods in which we take Maaser. Those 3 time periods actually are not separate fiscal periods. And you actually can, if there's 5 born before a Goden, around Shavuot time, 5 born before Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and 5 born after Rosh Chodesh Sivan, those actually can join together. When we said that we separate Masar Behema 3 times a year, that was only for convenience, so that now you're able to eat and use and bring as sacrifices of new animals. But actually, if you're talking about the collection and what you can bring for each other, it goes by an entire year, not the 3 time periods, and the cutoff is Rosh Hashanah. אמר רבי יוסי, הדה עומדת מעשר בהמה, לא עשו אותה, לא כחנת ולא כשליש. So according to this, we see that the מעשר behema is not the same as the principle that we use for fruit and for grain. What's the principle for fruit? When is a new fruit? No, Tu B'Shvat, right? Is Rosh Hashanah le'ilanot. That means that anything that became a fruit. At what point does you call something that it became a fruit? When it forms a fruit. When you look on the branch and you see the first formation of the fruit, then you say this belongs to this current year. So if something formed a fruit right after Tu B'Shvat, that belongs to the next year. If it had formed before Tu B'Shvat, belongs to the previous year. Okay, so you go by the formation. How about for grain? For grain, we do shlish, a third of a growth. You have wheat, and the wheat grows a third of its amount. Then that's considered sufficient that you could offer it, right? If you needed to bring a grain offering, you could use a third of its growth. Before that, it's considered like nothing. It's not yet old enough, mature enough to be considered anything. And so therefore, it doesn't count towards that fiscal year. So you see, in these cases, even though they're not fully developed, the cutoff time is when it is offerable, right, regarding wheat. Now, and the animals are not like that. When can an animal be offered? Only after it's born. 8 days after it's born, you can bring it as offering. The first 7 days, you're not allowed to bring an offering of an animal. That's the general rule regarding animals. So in Temar Kechenet, now if the animals were like fruits, then you should go by the pregnancy. Any animal that's conceived from the 1st of Tishrei until the 29th of Elul, then you go by conception. Conception is equivalent to the fruit being formed still on the tree, but not yet edible. And we don't say that. I mean, there was one opinion, but that's not the majority. We don't follow that. In Temar Kishlish, if you're going to make the animals like grain, then the cutoff time should be anything born till the 22nd of Elul. So then there'll be 8 days. If it's born on the 22nd, then by Rosh Hashanah, it'll be 8 days old. And if it's 8 days old, it can be offered as a sacrifice. And that's why then it's ready to be part of that year. But if it was born on the 23rd or 24th, then that won't be offerable till after Rosh Hashanah. And in that case, it should go to the next fiscal year, if it were like grain. From the fact that we did not say that, but instead, whatever is born, even if it's born the day before Rosh Hashanah, it belongs to the previous year. So you see that animals are not like fruits or grains. Okay. Rabbi Shammai, Beshem Rabbi Bevai, Rabbi Chia, Kashlish Asuotar. Rabbi Shammai says, no, in fact, the animals are like grain. And it's only when it's offerable, meaning 8 days later. How does it work? Because we're going to follow the Bishimon. The Bishimon says, even though it's not yet 8 days old, still it goes into the pen and can be brought as part of the tithe. And we don't, and then we'll wait 8 more days, and it's okay. So it is, in fact, it does go like that. אמר לה, את אמרת חדה מילתה, אמרת ננן בן עזאי, אומר, האלולים מתעשרים לזמן, לא, אפילו נולד 29 באלול. So Bimana says, did you really just say that? After all, the Mishnah talks about Ben Azai. Ben Azai said anything born in Elul. So it's a very specific period he's talking about, is its own fiscal time period. So obviously that means even after the 22nd. So he's not following the Bishimon. So it would make sense if he's following Bishimon, but that wouldn't make sense that Ben Azai is following a single opinion, minority opinion, and not the Banan. So we reject that. כן, את אמר על דבן עזאי, הניחן לגורן הבא, והן מתעשרים, הם בני אלולים. Rather, we have to say that just like according to Rabbanan, who disagree with Rabbi Shimon there, that we leave them over to the next year, and they will become said with the animals
of the previous year. In other words, you can't take them as Ma'aseh right now because they're not ready, but rather you would leave them on the side. Anything born within the last 8 days of the year, you leave them on the side, and then once they're 8 days old, you take them all and take Ma'aseh from them for the previous year. You just do it at a different time, but really they belong to the previous year. Since that's what Rabbanan say, for Ben Azai also we would do the same thing. So now you have to take that Elul and split Elul into 2 time periods. Anything born in the first 22 days, you take Maaser from them, that's good. And then the next 8 days, you have to also separate them and take Maaser from them, and then you'll join that when 8 days later, then you'll join that with the rest of the group. אמר רבי חייא, זאת אומרת, ימים שבכל מחוסר זמן בהן עולין לו לתוך שנתו. So we can, according to this, we can say that the days during which a firstborn is lacking time, in other words, when a firstborn is not yet 8 days old, that counts towards its first year. Firstborn should be offered or slaughtered in during the first year of its life, right? The Bechor has to be first year. And so the year is calculated not from the 8th day, but rather from the day of its birth. And we'll just, add those 8 days and just wait for them. But really we go by the birth date. אמר רבי מנה, אמר רבי יונה, אבא שמע לה מן הדה, כל הבכור אשר ייוולד, וגומר הזכר תקדיש כסד משעת לידתו, את מונה לו שנה. And so since regarding Bechor, it says, אשר ייוולד, from the time it's born, so we count the 1 year of a firstborn animal, because whatever you're going to do with the animal, you have to do within the first year. It doesn't go by the 8th day when it's ready to be sacrificed. So you see, it's not like grain and fruit, but rather from the time it's born. We're not actually going to do anything for the first 8 days, but that is the beginning of its counting. And so too, regarding Maaser, we count it according to when it's born, and even though we can't actually do it until it's 8 days old. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.